My name is Gusta Johnson, and I am proud to work at the Carnegie Council. The Council has been the voice for ethics in international affairs for nearly a century, but we need your help. To guarantee the future of programs like this one, please give generously to the Council's fund drive. Visit carnegiecouncil.org and click on Donate/Join. Thank you.
I've tried to interview a number of so-called illicit or illegal arms dealers. Probably 90% of them didn't want to have anything to do with me, unsurprisingly. And then I read in a Commission of Inquiry report of a man who was described as the scariest human being on the planet by someone who dealt with him. A Lebanese-Armenian gentleman based in Beirut. And I spent months searching for him. I thought, this is a guy who's never been interviewed. His name never comes up in the annual reports of the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, the gold standard of arms trade work. And eventually, after highly frustrating months, I was in Cape Town with my sister and her family, and I was telling them of this man I was trying to find. And my then 14-year-old niece said to me, well, why don't you look on Facebook? And I said to her, displaying my own ignorance at the time, a few years ago in mitigation, that I thought you had to be under 16 to use Facebook. So she took me to her computer. She developed a very basic Facebook page for me. I typed in the name Joe de Hovsepian, and sure enough, there he was. He was 77 at the time, wearing a Stetson hat in his photograph. So I emailed him and asked to speak to him. And in this world of Google and the internet, one has to be completely upfront about what one is doing, because anybody can Google you, especially if they're on Facebook. And I received what was effectively a one-line reply, which said something along the lines of, in my long life, I have never done anything for nothing. And I have no intention of changing. And I thought, well, what can I offer him? I realized it certainly wasn't money. But perhaps flattery would do the trick. So I wrote to him for months and months and months. Every time I met anyone involved in the industry, I'd send him an email to say, so-and-so says that you, more than anyone alive, are the person I need to talk to about the global trade in arms. And eventually, after I'd almost forgotten about him, I was sitting in my little office in North London and my cell phone rang, and a very Germanic-sounding voice said, this is de Hovsepian. I'll be at my office in Amman, Jordan on Sunday. Come and have a chat. I was so excited that I immediately booked a plane ticket, rushed home to pack a bag and to tell my wife that it was all completely secure, and then spent 6 hours en route to Amman, which I'd never visited before, wondering just how secure it was and whether it wasn't something of a setup. So I went to meet Joe, who was sitting in his very plush office. He has 8 or 9 offices around the world, still wearing his Stetson. And he told me about this extraordinary career in the illegal arms market. How he'd started off with a German company called Merex, formed by a former senior Nazi officer called Gerhard Mertens, whose first deals were done with the support of German and US intelligence in the early days of the Cold War, who used a string of former senior Nazi officers, including for 2.5 years Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, as arms agents. They also had on their books a few decades later Charles Taylor, the Liberian dictator, and his brother Bob. And he told me that once he'd split from Mertens, who did him out of $1 million on some deal or other, the number of UN arms embargoes he'd broken in the Balkans, in apartheid South Africa, in the Middle East, pretty much wherever there was conflict and wherever there was an embargo. With the help of an academic from British Columbia, I've calculated that there are about 502 recorded violations of UN arms embargoes. One has ever resulted in a court case, and the person involved was acquitted. But de Hovsepian must have been involved in quite a few of those 500 and something. And I think he thought, now having reached the age of 78, that it was time that he got recognition for the good work he'd done in the world. For in his own words, everything he has done has been in defense of humanity. I have armed the powerless to bring peace, he said to me. And then his party trick. He took from his desk drawer his contractor ID for his work in Iraq and Afghanistan for the US Department of Defense and 2 of the US's largest defense contractors. And then the tags for his work for USAID in Iraq and Afghanistan and Liberia.